I think we're starting something here. It's still looking good here, no? Happy holidays, at least it is for football fans. The NFL Draft is here, and this is our Steelers Now coverage on Pittsburgh Sports Live of the NFL Draft, leading up all the way to the Steelers pick in the first round. I am your host, Mike Asti, and this broadcast presented by Beaver County Auto, and right here, the Walnut Grill in Robinson, hosting our NFL Draft show for Steelers Now. I am joined alongside Cale Berger and Parker Hurley. Alan Saunders doing some work right now behind the scenes. Maybe he's going to jump on this broadcast if he can. Mike Vukovcan, Joe Steigerwald as well, kicking it behind the scenes. Guys, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, anything else you may celebrate. This is a holiday for football fans, and it is here. There were some rumors, the Steelers, though, right now slotted in to pick at number 20, maybe trying to trade up, maybe trying to improve their positioning. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of potential surprises here, and a lot the Steelers need, because this is a different year than normal. This is a season in which they missed the postseason. They're trying to rebuild more and get back into the postseason where they're mostly familiar with. Now, Parker, there's been conversation and rumbling the Steelers were trying to trade up. The Steelers seemingly trying to trade up maybe for one of the two Devins, trying to get that linebacker. There's cornerback, there's wide receiver, there's a lot of needs for the Steelers, but obviously they'd have to give up a lot to trade up. Do you think that's a wise decision? Would that be something you'd advise for them to trade up, to give up the haul they would need to give up to get that selection?
Right, and yeah, that's kind of what you were saying along the lines of, the linebacker is by far their biggest need. And in terms of, the best player at the biggest need, Devin Bush is going to be, a top 10 player at their biggest need. The question that, like you said, they have plenty of needs, and while they have 10 draft picks.
To say the least, yeah.
Right. While they have 10 draft picks, you still go in saying, to get from 20 to 10, how much is that really going to cost? It sounds like.
What do you think it would cost?
It sounds like it would cost at least, their second-round pick, one of their third-round picks, probably the third-round pick they got from Oakland, the higher of the two, and then maybe like a future third, something along those lines. So, you're saying that second and third-round pick, depending on how deep this draft is, those are top 70 picks. Those players could get on the field next season. So could you get 3 players on the field next season, or do you want that one Devin Bush? That's where it becomes the question.
Now, Cale, in terms of Devin Bush, in terms of him as a player and him as a draft prospect, do you see enough of him? I mean, is he somebody that you would covet that much? Is he a Kuechly? Is he a Brian Urlacher that you would be willing to almost mortgage most of your draft? Because the Steelers, in that situation, would then be left with the Antonio Brown pick and mostly late-round selections.
I would, and not only because I think that Devin Bush is a fantastic player, a fantastic talent at the middle linebacker position, but also because I think he fits exactly what the Steelers need. Ever since the unfortunate injury to Ryan Shazier 2 years ago, this Steelers defense has lacked significant speed at the middle linebacker spot. Someone who can defend sideline to sideline. If you add a guy like Devin Bush, who ran a 4.43 at the combine, a great split on the shuttle drill. I mean, he is an athletic linebacker. He's the future of the linebacker position, what you want in the NFL. A speedy guy that can cover and make tackles in space. I think Devin Bush fills all of those categories for the Steelers. And honestly, if I was in that situation, I would do what I can to make the deal to move up in the draft and be able to get a guy like him, because I think he's that much of an impact player and could solve so many of their issues defensively.
He's a different product than even the guys I mentioned in terms of the Urlachers and the Kuechlys, Ray Lewis's, etc., because he does fit into more of the current NFL mold. Those guys maybe wouldn't have due to maybe lacking the speed. He would fit right in, but I was at the media session with Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin on Monday, and they made it clear. They actually said some kind of breaking news, interesting developments. Guys, I know you've done some mock drafts. Parker, you put some mock drafts up on SteelersNow.com. You guys can still check those out. Kevin Colbert says, Parker, you wasted your time. Should never have done it. Completely a waste of time. Totally pointless. At least that's what he said in terms of his point of view as a general manager of a franchise. Kevin Colbert said the Steelers haven't done mock drafts in 10 years. And Tomlin nodded along. completely a waste of time is what they kept reiterating. So they made it clear they don't look for need, they look for best available. I guess, even though you'd be risking the rest of your draft, it would kind of lend to them trying to mortgage things and trading up for a linebacker if that's maybe who they think is the best available, because they have a lot of needs, so they maybe would rather go for the best.
Right. I think that fits into, like you said, they might trade up for Devin Bush, because you start to look into this class and how many players can you list off before Devin Bush is that best player available?
Right.
And while Kevin Colbert said we don't do mock drafts, what he said was, we'll do a mock draft, but it's a Steelers mock draft in terms of the Steelers are on the pick for number 1.
They're ranking their depth of value.
Right, and they're saying that if we select for 20 picks, we're going to get that 20th player at the very worst case scenario. If other teams do, take players that we don't value that high, we won't take them. But they might look at Devin Bush and say, well, he's the 6th best player available, let's just say. And then you add in the fact that there's a huge drop-off from Devin White, Devin Bush, and then who's the 3rd best linebacker? You could start naming off 7, 8 cornerbacks. You could start naming off, how many outside linebackers in this draft? 8, 9,
Right.
10. There's 2 linebackers. So then all of a sudden you say, that 6th player on our board, he's the 6th best player in the draft. He becomes a number 1 priority. And you say, to the Steelers, he might be worth the number 1 pick because he's that priority to them. So you say, just to move up to number 9 for our number 1 player, it becomes, enticing.
Which is what they said. They really do consider value when trading up or down, and we're going to keep updating you on the NFL draft as we move things along. No surprise, Kyler Murray out of Oklahoma does go number 1 overall to Arizona. Very, very interesting with Cliff Kingsbury becoming the head coach and kind of shaking things up. They draft Rosen and now another quarterback, and clearly changing the whole course of their franchise after just 1 season. So anything that's too surprising that may affect the Pittsburgh Steelers, we'll hit on and we'll make a part of this show. Mike Asti, Alan Saunders, Parker Hurley, Cale Berger, Steelers Now's draft coverage leading up to the Steelers' first pick in the first round of the 2019 NFL Draft. Right here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Remember to click subscribe on our YouTube channel to make sure you get this and the rest of our content on the channel, and follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live. Now, guys, the Steelers made it clear they prefer value. They prefer the best over need. I guess, Cale, I kind of want to ask you, do you agree with their strategy? There's been some criticism that maybe this is why they've struggled in recent drafts. They have a lot of need, especially at the cornerback position, which is what Kevin Colbert in particular has been criticized in terms of failing to draft. I was there, man. It was emphatic. We don't do mock drafts. We don't care about need.
Yeah, well, I agree with what Parker was saying, that they do a mock draft for themselves. They're making a list of what players they like, who they think can help them the most. I don't really buy it that they are just completely drafting on best available. I mean, this team has some clear needs. This is a team that was not in the playoffs last season. They clearly have holes they need to address. So I don't buy that one bit that they are just going to take whoever's the best available, where there might be a talent that you just can't pass up. Like we talked about a little earlier, and we're going to keep talking about for the remainder of the broadcast until the Steelers make that first selection, they have serious holes and they need to fill those holes. So I don't agree with the notion that, we're just going to take whoever we think is there that's going to be the best player. No, if you need a defensive back, you need to take that defensive back. If you need a middle linebacker, you need to take one or do what you can to get up and get them to get this team back to the playoffs where everyone in this city thinks they belong.
Now, I want to jump in here because I think the Steelers did something interesting that justifies that stance this offseason. If you look at what they did in free agency this offseason,
right,
and the additions that they made, I feel like they put themselves in a position where they're able to draft maybe not the best player available
off position of need.
Right. I feel like they're in a position to maybe not draft the best player available. Yeah, right. They're not going to take a quarterback. Okay. They're not going to take a running back. They're not going to take a running back in the first round.
Big Ben's Twitter account at his next show, they would do an impromptu broadcast in the middle of the offseason, would be pretty lit.
Right now, maybe. Actually, it might be tonight.
Go right now on a Facebook Live.
But they have a lot of needs, and they literally they could take a wide receiver. They could take a tight end. They definitely could take a tight end. They could take
underrated.
They could take a defensive lineman, not because they really need one, but it's a really deep drafted defensive line. They could take an outside linebacker. They could take an inside linebacker. They could take a cornerback. They could take a safety. Those are all legitimate needs for this team.
Yeah.
And so when Kevin Colbert says, we're going to take the best player available, On one hand, I think that's kind of BS because I don't think that they're not going to,
I've
like
been
Parker
lied to
said,
in that media room before.
like Parker said, they're not going to take a quarterback. On the other hand, this is a team with a lot of needs, and I don't think any of them necessarily outside of inside linebacker, which I don't think they're going to get at 20. I don't think any of the other ones necessarily need to be prioritized over any of the other ones. So I do think they're free to go a lot of different directions with this pick. And in a lot of ways, it would be kind of a fruitless exercise to sit there and try to figure out, the teams that are doing that are like the Bengals at 11. Oh, we really want an inside linebacker. Or one of the Devons going to make it to us. If you're a team that thinks, well, we could take one of 7 or 8 different positions, then it doesn't really matter what everybody does ahead of you. You just make your rankings of the players that you like, and when it's your turn to pick, you take the one that you had rated the best.
And that's exactly what they actually said. That was a question that a colleague asked, and they don't care what a rival does. Because there was controversy a couple years ago with the Ravens stealing picks from them right in front of them.
Right, Max Williams, tight end.
Exactly. They don't care, though. They said they're not going to worry about it. They're going to worry about their board above all else. But we mentioned they have so many needs, and that is why that maybe they would just take the best available or be willing to trade because they need to fix so many holes if they're missing the playoffs and underachieving based on their talent. What, though, would you say is their biggest need? Not necessarily the player that you're saying they're going to have to draft, but what need do they absolutely have to fill in this draft? Whether it be they didn't do enough in the offseason because they did bring in a corner, or just in general something that they need to immediately fix.
And, we still keep going back to, there's a reason they're trading up for Devin Bush, because while all things aside, and we do think Devin Bush is a great player, it still is their biggest need. And it goes back to, they lost Ryan Shazier, and then from the second they lost Ryan Shazier, you could just feel an impact, on that defense, and it went into, an embarrassment in the playoffs against the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? Yes. And, they go into that draft and they draft, Terrell Edmonds a safety, and then, a wide receiver, and then a quarterback, and offensive line, and you're saying, well, where's the linebacker? And then, they go throughout the season and, Morgan Burnett's playing in the linebacker role. And, now he's cut because he said, I wasn't supposed to play the linebacker role. And John Bostic and LJ Ford are defending Keenan Allen. You're still sitting back saying, well, they just went an entire offseason and now a full season without replacing Ryan Shazier. And now, they're going to head into Devin Bush and Devin White are gone. It's not going to be in the first round, but they have a need at linebacker that they have to address at some point. It's just, when are they going to address it?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It has to be linebacker. You need someone to quarterback that defense. You need someone that is going to run, like I said, sideline to sideline, to make tackles, to make this defense dynamic again. This defense was dynamic and athletic when they had Ryan Shazier at the middle linebacker spot. And, now when you just have Vince Williams and then a rotating cast of characters in there, you don't have that versatile, dynamic guy that can cover a tight end if he has to. They can cover a third down running back out of the backfield. They don't have that versatility now, not having Ryan Shazier for the past year and a half. So I absolutely think that they have to go and they have to get a middle linebacker, someone that is going to shore up the middle of that defense while also giving them some versatility against this new, wide open, throw it all over the place NFL.
And what's really interesting, they obviously haven't replaced Ryan Shazier since his injury. They need to replace him. It's been a big hole in their defense. But it's not like he was having a future Hall of Fame career. It's not like he was necessarily the best inside linebacker in the league or an immediate All-Pro. He was ascending. He was doing great things. But that goes to show that a piece that's not even to the level of a Kuechly or an Urlacher immediately can help their defense. Doesn't have to necessarily be a Hall of Famer you place in there. A Shazier capable all-star level player is kind of what they need, but that may be difficult to replace. That seems like it's unlikely they're going to be able to replace that if they don't trade up. And so far the draft here with Bosa going number 2, it's going as we would expect. And Bosa and some personal connections to Cale here from high school days, high school football.
Yeah, he's a fellow South Florida product. Obviously, he turned out way better than myself did on the football field. But, an incredible talent. Was a stud at Ohio State. Enjoyed watching him there. And I think he's going to be a stud for the 49ers for years to come. And I'm glad he's repping the 954.
Okay.
So Nick or Joey, I got to ask. Nick or Joey?
Joey.
Oh, okay.
Oh man, okay. Are they going to know? That's the Cale pick.
I hope they don't find out.
Okay. But if they can't actually fix that position at least right away with somebody they feel could be an All-Pro in the first round, is there an opportunity? Is it possible for them to still replace it adequately enough in the later rounds? Because linebacker seems to be the need you feel they need to immediately replace.
That's where it becomes an issue, and that's where, like I said, Devin Bush goes from a good player to a coveted player in this draft, because that number 3 linebacker, it's a serious question. Everybody came into the draft process saying, well, Mack Wilson from Alabama is that linebacker. But if you watched Alabama this year, especially defensively, you could say, well, they took a step down defensively when Mack Wilson stepped up in terms of being a play caller.
Right.
And then Mack Wilson misses his combine and runs a 4.7 at his pro day. You just said, Devin Bush is a 4.4 linebacker. Mack Wilson is a 4.7 linebacker. So you're saying that, not only is Mack Wilson questionable in play calling, he's a lot slower. So you start to say, is that the linebacker 3? When's he going to go? And, to plug, like you said, my mock draft from earlier this week, I think one of the best options is Ben Burke-Kirven from Washington.
I'm sure
I really
Kevin Colbert read your mock draft. I'm sure he checked it out.
What's great about this is they actually did bring him into Pittsburgh for a pre-draft interview. I think they started to look around the landscape, because if you look into some of their pre-draft interviews, it's linebacker.
Right.
I think they looked at the landscape and said, we're not going to get Devin Bush. There's a huge gap between, when we can get a linebacker and when we can't. So let's start looking at these late-round guys. And Ben Burke-Kirven's absolutely one of them. Like I said, in that, you can check it out in the article, because he's highly productive. He's actually underratedly athletic. And I think he has a chance to next year at least be a cover linebacker, where, like Cale said, 3rd and long or 3rd and, who's covering that linebacker in the flats? If all Ben Burke-Kirven does is play 3rd downs and defend the linebacker or the running backs in the flats, then, in the 4th round, that's fine. He's a little undersized. His arm length is his biggest issues. But like I'm saying, if he's a specialty player, then that's what you have to do. And, the fact that there's nobody else on the board, you may just have to say, let's wait until the 3rd or 4th round, and let's try a guy like Ben Burke-Kirven from Washington.
It does appear that they'd have to give up too much to move up to get a top-level linebacker in, say, the first 10, first 12 picks, and that maybe you go to somebody, maybe you go to the secondary, you replace that need immediately with an all-pro. Greedy Williams has been in a lot of mock drafts slotted to the Steelers if they would stay at number 20 and then worry about linebacker later, because they would lose so much in their overall draft board if they gave up that haul to, say, move up for a Devin or whatever else in the top 15. Outside of linebackers, though, because that's a point that we can harp on forever. That's a point that's been harped on forever since the Ryan Shazier injury. Who do you feel is the top-level corner in this draft, and then a corner the Steelers are most likely able to get? Because that might be two different questions.
Well, what Mel Kiper said, I think Allen was, reporting that they might get the best cornerback in the draft at the number 20 overall pick. That's according to Mel Kiper. And in my opinion, and like, plugging myself again in my mock draft,
you're welcome to do so. It's all kind of what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Just shamelessly plugging myself.
SteelersNow.com, it's all there.
I thought, personally, I think
Donnie has a thread, too. Go to Donnie's Twitter.
Right, Donnie has a great thread where he has every article we wrote. So I personally think Byron Murphy might be the best cornerback. And like I said, the Steelers brought him in for a pre-draft interview, so there's at least some sort of interest there. But Greedy Williams, I think, checks all the Steelers' boxes in terms of the Steelers typically draft in the first round. They typically will, overrate or overdraft freak athletes,
right.
Players who are height, weight, speed, everything like that. Greedy's over 6'1". He's under 4'4" in the 40, and he has really long arms. He can play press man, he can play zone corner. The issue with Byron Murphy for a lot of people is that he's just pretty much a zone cornerback, whereas Greedy plays them all. I think that checks the most boxes. So I really think Greedy Williams, in my opinion, would be the best player. I know, there's a lot of questions with his personality. He hasn't met anybody in the pre-draft process.
Don't know anything about that. That wouldn't be a concern in any way. And that was also asked of Colbert. He said that he can't recall ever checking anybody off of his draft board or off the value based on social media behavior. So they don't care too much about that, obviously.
Right, so, whatever they feel about Greedy, the issue is, like I said, he hasn't had any pre-draft visits, so it's not just the Steelers, it's everybody. So nobody has a gauge in terms of where he's going to go. He could be there at 20, and the Steelers could love him at 20. He could fall into round 2. I really don't know. I would take him at 20. And like I said, I think him and Byron Murphy are my top 2 options. Do the Steelers agree? We're going to absolutely see.
Yeah, I would have to say Greedy Williams as well. I mean, you look at his performances in SEC play against, the likes of DK Metcalf, Riley Ridley. I mean, he was a stud in those matchups and those one-on-one matchups against some of the top receivers in this draft class. But like you said, Parker, he's got fantastic length. He's 6'3", 6'2", exactly what you want in the prototypical corner in 2019. And like you said, he can play man, he can play zone. And the Steelers at times like to switch that up as well, depending on the opponent. And when you talk about Byron Murphy as well, I like Byron Murphy a lot. Obviously, his speed is not where you want it to be, running about a 4.5 or so, and he's a little